Hello, our friend.
Hello, my friend. How are you?
We are well. How are you?
I'm very well as also. Thank you for asking.
Do you come in the light and love of the Infinite One Creator?
I do. Do you also?
Yes, we do.
Good. Thank you.
Yes, it's been a few days.
It has. Yes, it has. But we've not been unbusy. We've been preparing our previous conversations and putting them out for public consumption.
Yes, and we are delighted with the progress that you are making.
Great. Thank you.
We know Aaron doesn't have much experience with the Type E computer.
Right. With the computer. Right.
Yes. So
Well, she's doing the heavy lifting when we talk, and it takes her a while to recover.
Getting more proficient.
Yes.
Yes, as we have spoken about before, the planetary changes are continuing, as evident by your news people.
Mm-hmm.
However, what we find a little disconcerting is that they don't report the good things.
Right.
They don't. We know we keep talking about the V country, Venezuela.
Venezuela, yes.
Yes, the much suffering there, much suffering. Their government, as we had stated before, is not very benevolent.
Mm-hmm.
And so their people are coming together, which
Okay.
is going to become more pervasive throughout your globe as people start to recognize these discrepancies between what they say and what they do.
Mm-hmm.
We know that there is a big voting, people putting tickets in a box.
Right.
Coming
Yes.
up shortly.
Yes. Just
Which-
in 2 days.
After that, it's going to, we picture a boat
Mm-hmm.
swaying on the ocean, and it's going to sway one way or the other,
Right.
which will dramatically change the landscape and the populace.
Right.
Again, as we have spoken before, this is another stimulus for the population to make a determination as to service to self or service to others, even if they don't have the cognizance to recognize that.
Mm-hmm.
It provides that stimulus on a soul level
Right.
for them to make that determination. So this ballot where you put the thing in the box,
Mm-hmm. Voting opportunity.
yes, this is going to provide a tremendous opportunity for those to determine one way or the other. And it's also going to empower those within your population that have been pushed down, suppressed, based upon, we find this very discerning, but discerning, but they the color of their skin.
Right.
And so many within your populace do not take their votes or their voices seriously,
Mm-hmm.
which has led to an escalation in violence,
Right.
which you have witnessed within the population in your larger cities,
Mm-hmm.
and the brutality that has been exercised upon those that disagree with the mainstream.
Right.
So that's going to create, that's going to lead to some more difficulties, potentially.
Mm-hmm.
We don't know. We don't predict the future. But it will create more balance. in the end.
Ultimately, it will create more balance.
It will create more balance because those individuals that are being minimalized,
Mm-hmm.
we see like a minus sign,
Right.
they will begin to assume positions within those big buildings with the steps, the politics.
Yes.
They will start to assume more responsibility
Okay.
and ultimately make a change for all of the different non-white people, as you call them.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's going to be a big benefit.
Okay.
Then the other thing that we see is we see the lots of holidays.
Right.
That's what you call
Yes.
them, holidays.
We're entering the holiday season, as we call it.
Yes. The Thanksgiving, the tree,
Christmas, yes.
Christmas, yeah, and then the next one with the champagne,
New Year's.
New Year's, yes. So that is a tremendous stimulus for families, especially families, to congregate And many families are in tremendous conflict,
Mm-hmm.
especially given your political situation, headbutting.
Mm-hmm.
So, but these holidays serve a tremendous benefit in order for these families to congregate and try to sort out their differences,
Right.
whether they recognize it or not.
Mm-hmm.
So it provides a tremendous catalyst for them to, we picture hash browns, hash out,
Right.
their difficulties, but it goes way beyond politics. It's usually incidents that have occurred over the years based upon marriage moves, different political views, things of that nature. So your holidays are as stressful as many of your people deem them to be, with the, what do we picture? Shopping,
Right. Right.
wrapping,
Mm-hmm.
bows, gift
Traditions.
tying,
Yeah.
traditions. But it provides a tremendous stimulus for these individuals within a family unit, which they chose to incarnate with.
Right.
They just forget about it once they incarnate.
Mm-hmm.
But once they are incarnate, they are forced to deal with the conflict between them.
Mm-hmm.
And so these holidays that your society deems necessary helps them to come together in a civil fashion.
Mm-hmm.
Not always,
Right.
because the drink, the bubbly
Champagne.
and a cup, that, yeah.
Yeah.
That's not always so beneficial.
No, it's an intoxicant.
Yes, yes, yes. So then their attention is diverted elsewhere.
Well, their awareness reduced because of the intoxication. It has essentially the same effect as free will, but only on a more temporary basis, affecting the body and consequently the mind. Kind of
Yes.
reverse engineering.
Yes, it's almost like a compress
Mm-hmm.
that pushes down the awareness, the consciousness, and the majority of individuals that gather in those types of settings go into it with a good intention.
Mm-hmm. Right.
But when they imbibe those things in the bottle
Mm-hmm.
or a glass, then those intentions get distorted.
Right.
And then their perception gets distorted, and their awareness of what their initial attention was gets very distorted, and it leads to more chaos.
Mm-hmm.
So we see that in your holiday tradition. So we can go one of two ways. It's almost like a balance scale.
Right.
So on the one hand, you have the individuals within families and or societies or neighborhoods that want to come to an agreement, that want to be
We want
polite.
to find a happy medium.
Yeah, to be polite. But what we really hope that your populace can do, and some can, many can, is to respect another's political views, decisions, views on life, even if it differs from theirs,
Mm-hmm.
and still shake hands
Right.
and be comfortable with one another and respectful. Respectful, that's the word we're looking for.
Yes. Okay. All right. Very good. Well, thank you. If I may pursue a line of discussion that this touches upon, but we've addressed before, in the choice, the distinction or the choice between service to self and service to others being a primary function of the third density that we experience. The service to self distinguishes itself from service to others because it takes the identity that we all create as part of this experience and enhances that, which causes them to isolate and to perceive their autonomous being as their only existence.
It creates further separation,
Mm-hmm.
but from their perspective, and this is just our, what do you call that word, opinion?
Uh-huh.
Their perception of separation is a perception of increased power,
Mm-hmm.
of increased control.
Mm-hmm.
But ultimately they can only go so far up the scale.
Right.
And then they realize the deception that has occurred.
Mm-hmm.
And they realize that their desire for so much power, control, and feeling that isolation is equivalent to that
Mm-hmm.
creates them to ultimately realize the folly in their perception and thinking.
Mm-hmm.
Or it leads them to be very challenged to realize that perhaps another path might be more beneficial.
Mm-hmm.
And when that occurs, the separation from that group can occur,
Mm-hmm.
and they can go on a different evolutionary path up a more beneficial scale, a more feeling better scale than the current one they're in, where they're constantly battling for energy,
Mm-hmm.
constantly battling for status,
Mm-hmm.
and that makes them
Constantly in competition with everybody and everything.
yeah, and ultimately they have to come to the realization that there is no winner.
Right.
There's no winner.
Yeah.
It's just the battle that fuels the perpetual motion, and when they get so caught up in that, they can't see.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost like a horse with the blinders.
Mm-hmm.
So they can't see what's external to them,
Mm-hmm.
that they can access and move up the evolutionary scale. So it takes a tremendous amount of good energy for them to move beyond that, take the blinders off, and recognize. And that's very scary because they are so intertwined with that way of being.
When you say intertwined, that's codependent, right? They're codependent with their other travelers to sustain themselves with intelligent energy theft.
Yes, they kind of bounce off of one another,
Mm-hmm.
like a ping pong ball on a table.
Right.
They kind of bounce off one another, but not to benefit the other individual,
Right.
but to benefit themselves.
It's all self-serving.
Yes, and it's a false facade,
Mm-hmm.
very false facade.
Right.
And so until they gain that awareness, they're stuck in that loop, as we spoke about before, that circular loop.
Right.
And so until they attain enough awareness, which requires a tremendous amount of energy, but where they derive that energy from will either take them up the scale or down the scale.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Is my observation, my understanding, those individuals participating in our incarnate experiences, earthly beings, the people diagnosed as psychopaths, sociopaths, and even narcissists, are those that are evidently polarizing service to self. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. So there's reason for that behavior. They've chosen over multiple reincarnations to follow the service to self path.
Yes.
And so it generates a particular type of behavior.
Yes, and it takes multiple incarnations. So, for example, an individual incarnates and chooses to go service to self, whether they recognize it or not.
Mm-hmm.
They're given brief increments of a lifetime of what that's like,
Mm-hmm.
so that they can choose.
Right.
They're not just thrown into being a killer or something very negative of that nature.
Yeah. They're providing the opportunity for diverse experiences.
Yes.
Yes.
So it's incremental, but they feed off that energy and that power from hurting others.
Mm-hmm.
And so they get, it's almost like taking we know that our channel has not done any of this, but it's almost like taking a hit of cocaine,
Mm-hmm.
and you get that boom high,
Mm-hmm.
and you like it,
Mm-hmm.
whether it's good or bad.
Yeah.
And so you seek more and more of it. So it becomes kind of like this, as we spoke about before, a hamster ball.
Right.
And so there's more and more of it that's sought.
And that's why they pursue immediate gratification in their
Yes.
experiences.
Yes, they don't look for long-term feeling well, doing well by others. That's not the motivation. The motivation is all inside, and I want what I want, and I want it now.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And so that's where that comes from.
Yeah. And in the course of our evolution, from the standpoint of lessons to be learned about the inherent characteristics, those polarizing service to self have chosen to skip the fourth heart chakra, which is our investigation of love.
Yes, because that poses a threat. Because when you explore the heart chakra, you have to have compassion for another.
Right.
But also, importantly, you have to have compassion and love for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
They are in such, we'll use your word, chaos,
Mm-hmm.
that they are incapable of imposing that upon themselves.
Right.
They
They don't allow themselves to be vulnerable with themselves.
No, because they feel guilt, shame, afraid. Fear is a big factor. So by imposing fear on another, they feel stronger, but only for a short period of time.
Yeah. So they have to do it again.
They have to do it again. Yeah.
So the guilt and shame are just behaviors that result from fear.
Yes.
Yeah.
And the fear is, it's usually, how shall we say, inflicted at a young age, but they hold on to that. Like you're holding onto a rope so you don't fall down, because they don't know any different. But the fear is all that they know, so that's what they stay with. And until they can change that frame of reference and that comfortability,
Right.
because people tend to stay with what feels comfortable, and if fear is comfortable, people are going to gravitate towards that, because
it's familiar. It may not be comfortable, but it's familiar.
It's familiar, and that's all they know.
Yeah.
Until they gain enough awareness to change that perspective and pursue something more beneficial.
Okay. And we had talked before about the opening of portals, the service to self portals that have been opened around the globe.
Yes.
And that permits influx of service to self individuals that are not incarnate.
Yes.
Is that correct? And
that
allows
is correct.
them to interact with the population.
Yes, that allows them to interact with individuals that are prone to service to self, that have low consciousness. So they are very easily influenced by other individuals around them, but also thoughts that get thrown out there. We picture like a soccer ball being thrown out. And so they're more likely to gravitate towards something like that they can relate to.
Right.
Because it validates their false sense of identity. So they can gravitate towards that and hold on to it. And the unfortunate part is it's almost like a virus where they can spread that to other individuals that are of the same low consciousness.
And this is all accomplished in thought. There's nothing that we can experience other than in a thought. Is that correct?
It's mostly in thought. However, your box with the pictures and the other box with the turny dial that plays music, that's a big contributor as well.
But those still are parts of thought. We listen and we see, which simply adds the expansion of thought, the interaction with what we perceive to be the physical world. Are those not? That's still thought.
It is still thought. Yes, you are.
Okay. And the service to self is not capable of creating thought. Is that correct?
They cannot create thought. However, they can pull it in.
They direct it.
They can pull it in
Yeah.
and direct it, as you said, in a certain fashion with a certain intensity towards those that are of a lower consciousness and that are susceptible and think that these ideas or thoughts are good and come from a higher source.
Right.
And they don't have the discernment, which is why so many in the sand part of your world with the pyramids.
Middle East, yes.
Yes. They are greatly influenced by this.
Right.
Because their awareness is relatively low. It used to not be this way.
Right.
But their awareness is relatively low. And so they're grasping, looking for something to hold on to. And so when you consistently get these thoughts and ideas, they tend to stick, because they don't have the discernment to say, this is good, this is bad, this is good, this is bad.
Right.
They lack that discernment. And it's not just in that part of the world.
Right.
It occurs in many, many countries throughout your globe.
Mm-hmm. But to dispel the service to self, to sway the populace towards service to others, then it's incumbent upon each individual to become aware of the thoughts and dismiss those thoughts or reject those thoughts that are negative in nature or service to self in nature, is it not?
Yes, it's incumbent upon each individual. And also, it is incumbent upon the few leaders. We don't particularly like that term, leaders. Few individuals that demonstrate service to others, to emulate that type of behavior, thinking, writing. And so they, as we've spoken about before, can provide the information, talk with the microphone, and try to educate the populace in a different way of thinking.
Right.
And so the information can only be provided. It's incumbent upon each individual as to whether or not they are receptive.
Right. But the individual is responsible. The leaders, as you refer to them, are models for others to emulate, to offer them an illustration or an example of what they perceive to be a person happier than they are.
Yes.
And so they surrender at that point, they begin to surrender their negative thoughts and their dissatisfaction, their unhappiness, in order to emulate what they perceive to be happier.
Yes.
So we're all motivated still to get more of what we like. It's just a matter of becoming aware of what we like.
Yes. And it's easy to become distracted from what you like, because you have all these gadgetries and things in the store on those hangers.
Right, the things that perpetuate our chaos.
Yes, many, many distractions. So, which is why we said this before, is that tribes in the Amazon jungle, tribes in the Sahara Desert, people that your civilized world, as you call it, would consider immature. They are actually very, very spiritually advanced, because those things are irrelevant. And they take care of one another, they respect one another, which is something that your society is sort of lacking in.
Yeah, and we've shunned that as we've become more quote unquote civilized, as you say.
Yes.
Yeah, the other thing that I wanted to pursue along this line, we who are the space-time or the physical world inhabitants of Earth, of the third density and now fourth density experience, are analog projections of our metaphysical self. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Those polarizing service to others, for the most part, sustain multiple incarnations, multiple analog projections simultaneously. Is that correct?
We wouldn't say multiple. We would say maybe 2.
Okay.
Because it requires a lot of energy to maintain both.
Now, is that because of where we are? Because my understanding was when we begin the third density experience, we have the energy for only a few, as you say, 2, maybe 3. But as we progress through the density, then we have greater energy to incarnate in more.
Yes, as you progress through the densities, you have greater energy to incarnate, if you will, into different planetary analogs, different planetary...
different analog projections.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it requires a higher A higher density, because this third density is
A higher density or a dimension within the density?
a higher dimension within the density.
Okay.
But this particular
What we experience doesn't have that latitude, doesn't have that opportunity because of our low energy, low consciousness.
yes, and it's very heavy. It's very heavy. So it's incumbent upon each individual to rise above that, and that could take multiple lifetimes.
Right. It's my understanding also that those polarizing service to self recognize the necessity of focusing their energy, and so if they were incarnating in multiple simultaneous incarnations, they elect to consolidate all into one incarnation. Is that correct?
Yes, they try to incarnate all into one, but there's much conflict in between each of them, so it makes it much more difficult because they're, as you have said, battling for energy, but they also don't have the awareness to move beyond where they're at because they are so focused on a hierarchy
Right.
and moving above and above and above and above and above. And so that creates a great amount of conflict, requires a great amount of energy. And so they kind of peter out.
Yeah. So they need to consolidate the energy that they have into one incarnation so that one incarnation will have the resources to battle, as we're referring to it.
Yes, if they can all agree, which is of great difficulty, but it's of a great service to them to, how do we say this, work together, and that's very much against their nature, but it provides a great service for them to consolidate and say, you do this, I do that, and it's an exchange of energy, which requires...
But that depolarizes them, doesn't it?
Yes, it does.
Okay. So those individuals that have successfully graduated from the Earth experience along the service to self path, it's my observation that they were very influential in the population from a domination and subjugation standpoint. In other words, they were very successful in dominating and subjugating others.
Yes, because the populace 2,000 years ago, plus from your time perspective, did not have the awareness nor the knowledge to recognize such things. And because they were so dependent upon having food, shelter, and water, they didn't question it.
And those individuals that in our current experience that are apparently polarizing service to self and theoretically nearing the end of their training period and in preparing for graduation along the service to self line, they too are demonstrating significant capabilities to dominate and subjugate others, and that's the source of their energy acquisition. They do things in order to create opportunities to confiscate energy from others. Is that correct?
Yes, this phenomenon has been ongoing for a millennium, and we foresee it perpetuating even further. We see more divisiveness. You see it within your own country between the people with the blue and the red.
In Russia. The blue and red, is that the...
No, within your own country.
Within our country?
Yes.
Oh, yes. Oh, the political parties.
Yes, yeah, that.
Yeah, the political parties. And it is my observation that over the last several decades, that the parties themselves have become magnets for the service to self, service to others dichotomy.
Yes, because the more that people feel that they're right, that my blue or red group is correct, and they band together, then they feed off one another.
Right.
And so then they feel more energized. And so it creates more division because they feel like they are gaining more energy based upon how divisive they can be, when in all actuality, it only creates more chaos in the end.
Right.
We find your blue and red political systems to be very divisive, but it serves a purpose for individuals to polarize one way or the other.
Right.
And there's no really two ways about it, because we see all the people with the flags,
Right.
the handheld flags that they on the corners of your streets.
They wave, yes. Yeah.
So it's providing them a stimulus. However, the stimulus is leaning much more towards service to self, because they're not recognizing the other side of the field.
But they're more demonstrative. They're more domineering.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that creates more difficulties, and it will create more division until the populace within your own country recognizes how harmful that is to populace as a whole. And that's not just inclusive to your country. It's the same divisiveness that's occurring in Europe, Western Europe, and particularly in Eastern Europe. There is a great conflict there, and people are suffering tremendously.
Right.
Because the far country that controls the oil that goes to the Ukrainian people,
Russia.
That's it. Yes, they are creating great difficulties for the people there, and we don't foresee that changing anytime soon. We could be wrong. We don't know. But that's what we see.
Yeah. The one other thing to follow up, and I think we probably need to let our channel go. This is usually the end of her stamina. We've talked about the children coming in as being actually fourth density. And this is a topic I would like to pursue in another session, but it's my understanding that fourth density does not incarnate in multiple analog projections while they're still incarnating. Is that correct?
It depends.
Okay. Is that opportunity for dependence part of their experiences in the Earth experience? In other words, do they choose whether to multiple incarnations?
They choose.
Okay. And is that commonly the case with beginning fourth density entities throughout the universe, that they choose multiple or singular incarnations?
Being a fourth density, they cannot incarnate in multiple times because they have to adjust.
Right.
So it usually takes some, as you would call it, time before that can occur.
Okay.
Okay, we're going to let her go.
Thank you.